I know you're eager to start looking at the implementation of our adapter for 3CX, but before we get there, let's actually cover class that our adapter is derived from, BSS Adapter External DB. We slightly touched it in our video about 3PBX, but it's worth covering in more details. The idea is that many cases that you will be implementing, user information is stored in some database outside of WebTrit, could be your cloud database, could be on-premise database. So really what your adapter will be doing, it needs to extract the data from a database, map attributes. So for instance, in your database, the field is called username. In WebTrit, it's called user ID, so it has to do this remapping and return the information. So we try to make it as easy as possible for you. So BSS Adapter External DB is derived from our BSS Adapter class, and also Assemble OTP Handler. It's a class which implements generation and verification of one-time passwords. There's a separate video section about it. And what do we have inside here? So in the init method, it initializes attributes of database of users, of sessions, and one-time passwords. Here it says to none. Obviously, in your subclass, you will have to assign them with some real values. It's going to be an object which provides interface similar to dictionary for retrieving data, and based on our class called type hash value. And then we need some methods to extract required information from the database. So for instance, when user enters a login, which could be email, could be phone number, because the same account can use different ways to identify itself. Right? And we need to find that user record. So by default, we just assume login equals to user ID, but you can override this method by something else. Or maybe you can first look up by email, then by phone number, then by some other attributes. Okay, retrieve user info. It's extracting information about the user when we know exactly the user ID, so that unique identifier. When we get the data from the database, when we receive a record or an object in your proprietary format, how do we, where the user ID with unique identifier is stored? And this is default method, which does some guessing, but you probably should implement it with something more precise, which does exactly what you need to do. Okay. And a method to verify password. So we have an object which was returned from your database, and we have password entered by the user, right? And here with default method, it does some guessing, so it tries to see if your object has attribute password and then compares it, but you probably should implement something more specific which handles your situation better. Okay, then we have produce user object. So again, we take this data which is stored in your database with proprietary object, and we have to map the fields to and create an object called end user. That's the one which WebTrit uses. And again, the default implementation just assumes they are identical, which is probably not the case. So in our 3CX module, we'll take a look how to implement that method. Method authenticate. This is where we override the method from BSS Adapter class, and hopefully you don't need to change it, because I feel we have most of the logic in here. So we got information about the user who is trying to log in. We try to find that user. If user is found, we verify his or her password. If verification is successful, then we extract this unique user identification, user ID. So this way, if user logs in through phone number, through email, we'll still put these two records together. We'll know it's the same user. We create a new session. We store that session, so it's going to be persistent and user can use it later on, and return it. We're done. Otherwise, we return error with invalid password, or just basically the user is not there. And the function of retrieve user, this is when the user, after being logged in, WebTrit backend tries to retrieve user information, specifically credentials for the SIP server. So again, we try to retrieve the user record, and then we map attributes and return a proper object which represents end user information. Otherwise, we just return error code. And these are the methods which you will have to override, provide in your class. So what's the version of your adapter? What is the name of it? Get capabilities, which functions your adapter and your system supports. Can it retrieve CDRs? Can it retrieve call recordings and so on? Retrieve contacts, and if you want to provide list of other extensions in the system, in the PBX, and we'll take care of this in our 3CX implementation. Retrieve call recordings, retrieve list of calls, call recordings, and attempt to do the online sign up. Well, this is it about external BSS adapter with external database. Now let's move on and let's take a look at our actual 3CX adapter.